Pacers and I had an absolutely fantastic time watching them throughout this entire playoffs run, and that excitement will definitely continue moving forward. The Thunder vs. Pacers Game 1 is scheduled for Thursday. My comprehensive preview for that matchup should be ready and published by Monday at the latest. The performance we saw tonight was a masterclass in playoff basketball, with both teams showing why they've made it this far in the postseason. Meanwhile, the Knicks demonstrated the heart and determination that has defined their season, even though they ultimately came up short. His ability to stick with Brunson through screens showed incredible discipline and basketball IQ that you do often see from younger players in high-pressure playoff situations. What impressed me most were those great defensive plays where Miles Turner would contest Brunson's initial move, but then Nembhard would anticipate exactly what was coming next. These weren't just lucky plays or good positioning, this was systematic. Intelligent defense that came from extensive film study and understanding of opponent tendencies. This game will be remembered as a classic example of playoff basketball at its finest. With momentum swings, clutch performances, those double teams with Seacom that led to shot clock violations were accidents. They were perfectly timed defensive rotations that disrupted the Knicks' offensive flow and really showcased why he's become such a valuable piece for this Pacers team. His ability to hold up well in those one-on-one post situations against a player of Kott's size and skill level demonstrated incredible strength, positioning, and defensive fundamentals that you have to respect. This kind of team defense, anchored by individual excellence, is exactly what makes the Pacers so dangerous in these playoff situations. I have to say, he's definitely bordering on offensive fouls with some of these moves. And there were several instances where he probably should have been called for charges, especially that play where he absolutely bulldozed Miles Turner. And defensive stops that changed the entire complexion of the series. They didn't have completely horrible games by any stretch of the imagination, but their performances definitely were into the level they needed to be to win this crucial playoff game against a motivated Pacers team. These two players seemed to be carrying the offensive load while Cat and Brunson were struggling to find their rhythm and get comfortable against the Pacers. Defensive schemes. That defensive stop immediately led to one of those beautiful Thomas Bryant three-pointers that got the crowd on their feet and shifted all the momentum toward Indiana. Nembhard's transition threes and those beautiful Seacom leak-out plays showed the kind of basketball IQ and court awareness that championship teams possess. And they're going to make you pay for every single mistake you make. The question in every playoff series they play is whether the opposing team is ready for all the different ways the Pacers can hurt you. And tonight the Knicks simply weren't able to keep up with that relentless pace and pressure. When Seacom was pushing the ball off of made baskets, creating easy scoring opportunities in transition, it demonstrated the kind of hustle and awareness that makes this team so dangerous. These sequences don't happen by accident. They're the result of excellent team basketball and players understanding their roles perfectly. The way Indiana was switching, helping, and recovering made it difficult for New York to get into any kind of offensive flow. These are the moments that separate good teams from great teams, and the Pacers have mastered the art of capitalizing on opponent mistakes and turning them into game-changing runs. When your two primary offensive weapons are having to work this hard just to get decent looks, it puts tremendous pressure on the rest of the roster to step up and fill the void. He consistently forced Cat into difficult positions, making him work much harder for every shot attempt than Cat is probably accustomed to facing during the regular season. The way Seacom used his body to deny good position and force Cat away from his sweet spots was textbook post-defense. The intensity level was exactly what you'd expect from a do-or-die playoff atmosphere. And both coaching staffs made adjustments throughout the game that kept fans on the edge of their seats. The timing and communication required to execute those defensive rotations at playoff intensity levels speaks to the defensive chemistry this Pacers team has developed throughout the season. We'll dive deep into how the Pacers managed to get to this point in their remarkable journey. His ability to switch on to different offensive players and maintain the same level of intensity and effectiveness is what makes him such a valuable defensive weapon. This kind of defensive flexibility is exactly what teams need in today's NBA, where offensive players are constantly trying to create mismatches and exploit weaknesses in defensive schemes. And we also spent some time doing some big picture analysis on the Knicks and what this series meant for their franchise. But before we get into all of that future content, let me talk about what we just witnessed in this incredible game. The Pacers showed their championship mettle tonight, executing their game plan to perfection when it mattered most. The defensive performance by Nembhard in this game, particularly his coverage on Brunson, was absolutely spectacular and deserves serious recognition. Nembhard seemed to have a sixth sense about Brunson's tendencies, particularly when it came to those passes underneath the basket to Mitchell Robinson. Time and again, we saw Nembhard position himself perfectly to steal those passes, or at least disrupt the timing enough to force a turnover or a difficult shot. Even when Brunson managed to beat him initially with a quick first step or a clever move, Nembhard's recovery was phenomenal. His ability to stay with Brunson and provide contests from behind showed the kind of defensive awareness that championship teams are built on. Beyond the individual matchup with Brunson, Nembhard also showed great help defense instincts. Voiceover 3. Siakam's dominant post defense. Siakam's defensive performance tonight, particularly in his post coverage against Cat, was nothing short of dominant. What made Siakam's defense so effective wasn't just his physical presence, but his understanding of angles and leverage in the post. Those double teams that Nembhard and Siakam executed together were particularly impressive, leading to multiple shot clock violations that completely disrupted the Knicks' offensive rhythm. Even beyond the post defense, Siakam showed great versatility in his defensive approach. Now, we did still see some moments where Cat managed to beat his defender with those incredibly reckless drives that have become somewhat of a trademark for him this season. Despite these aggressive drives and his ability to occasionally break through the defense, both Cat and Brunson managed to get some decent looks and convert on some important possessions. What really stood out was how much Og and Randall were bailing them out throughout the game, particularly during what felt like the entire first half. The Knicks' offensive struggles weren't just individual issues. They seemed to be having trouble with the Pacers' team defense as a whole. But then, as it so often does with this Pacers team, you just witnessed these absolutely back-breaking sequences that completely changed the momentum and energy of the entire game. One of those perfect examples was that Siakam post-defense play I mentioned earlier, where Cat simply couldn't score on him despite multiple attempts. The missed free throws that turned into transition opportunities were another perfect example of how the Pacers capitalize on every mistake. We absolutely know the story with this Pacers team by now. They're going to run. They're going to push the pace. One of the biggest questions going into any playoff series involving the Pacers is whether the opposing team is truly ready for all the different ways Indiana can attack you offensively. And unfortunately for New York, the Knicks were simply not able to keep the Pacers' offensive weapons contained nearly enough to win this game. Eventually, we started seeing Haliburton really taking advantage of Cat's defensive positioning, particularly when Cat was dropping back on screens and giving Haliburton too much space to operate. You could see the confusion in Cat's body language at times. He seemed frozen and unsure about whether he should go high up on screens or stay back and protect the paint. The Pacers' offensive system is designed to create exactly these kinds of problems for opposing defenses, and they executed their game plan to perfection when it mattered most. And that indecision cost the Knicks dearly. However, because I always try to be fair and balanced in my analysis, I did walk that criticism back somewhat, especially after the Kings made the playoffs last year and showed some real progress as a franchise. It's among many other positive impacts. That trade completely changed Pacers fans' basketball lives. Not just for right now in this playoff run. Turner's offensive game, particularly his pick-and-pop spacing ability, and everything that his three-point shooting does for their overall offensive system, has become a crucial component of what makes this Pacers team so difficult to defend against, but potentially for a very long time moving forward into the future. Turner's ability to stretch the floor has opened up driving lanes for guards like Haliburton and created better spacing for the entire offensive system. The way the Pacers kept putting Brunson in difficult defensive actions over and over again late in the game was a brilliant strategic move that exposed some of the Knicks' defensive weaknesses. Remember when the Celtics originally drafted NSMITH Celtics fans, myself included? We're genuinely very excited about the potential we saw in his game and what he could bring to the organization. When you can consistently target a specific defender and force him into uncomfortable situations, it creates opportunities not just for individual scoring, but for the entire offensive system to function more smoothly. The development of players like N. Smith and Nembhard really highlights how important player development systems and organizational patience can be in maximizing talent. It was frustrating to watch because you could see the talent was there. That kind of strategic thinking and roster management is what builds championship caliber teams over time. Similar to how he constructed that incredible defensive system around Dirk Nowitzki back in 2011 when the Mavericks won their championship, that 2011 team operated mostly around the free throw line area, with Dirk as the focal point, and Carlisle created a system that maximized every player's strengths while minimizing their weaknesses. But for whatever reason, Brad Stevens and the coaching staff just weren't ready to give him meaningful minutes in real game situations. Of course, there's going to be some valid criticism directed toward him, particularly regarding his rotation management, which has been an ongoing conversation topic throughout his tenure with the organization. And I'm not sure if you want to give him credit for that adaptability, or if it's just an observation worth noting. Maybe I'm being overly critical here, but it feels like there's significantly more potential to explore with the Cott Brunson. The two-man game than what they VA actually developed and utilized this season. Cutting ability screens, setting hustle, overall flow of the game, understanding and passing throughout the season. However, the dude literally didn't hit the rim on 2 different three-point attempts tonight, which tells you something about his shooting consistency. Now look, I don't know exactly where he ranks on that list. There are definitely some legendary names that you'd probably put above him, but sometimes it becomes too easy for opposing teams to help off of him defensively, which creates spacing problems for your primary scorers. So don't get me wrong about that, but he's definitely up there among the elite coaching minds in basketball history. At the very least, what the Knicks could really use is a wing player who brings better shooting ability and defensive prowess than Josh Hart currently provides. The way he's managed rotations, called timeouts at crucial moments, and implemented defensive schemes that neutralize opponent strengths has been coaching at its absolute finest. This defensive breakdown wasn't just about individual players making mistakes, it was about the Knicks' inability to communicate effectively and make the necessary adjustments as the game progressed. The Knicks' defensive struggles became more pronounced as the game went on, and their inability to get crucial stops in crunch time ultimately cost them the game in the series. He has taken Haliburton's exceptional passing ability and court vision and built an entire offensive system that puts players in positions to succeed while creating constant problems for opposing defenses. He couldn't shoot effectively because he was getting so few opportunities that he never got into any kind of consistent rhythm. But he was always playing incredibly hard and showing the kind of effort and intensity that coaches love to see. The Haliburton and Sabonis trade is something that, in the moment when it happened, I absolutely said was the stupidest thing of all time for the Sacramento Kings, and I wasn't shy about expressing that opinion. But here we are now, and I think it is fair to say that this trade has proven to be absolutely transformational for both franchises involved, though in very different ways. The trade also freed up Miles Turner in ways that I do and think people fully appreciated at the time it happened. When you have a center who can step out and hit three-pointers consistently, it changes the entire geometry of your offense and forces opposing defenses to make really difficult decisions about how to cover your actions. Looking back now, it's clear that this trade was a franchise-altering move that set the Pacers on a completely different trajectory than anyone could have predicted at the time. N. Smith's journey has been absolutely fascinating to follow, and it really speaks to the importance of patience and development in today's NBA. But then, I'm pretty sure he just didn't play at all during his first game, and that pattern continued for a decent chunk of his rookie season. When N. Smith finally did start getting regular playing time, it became clear that rhythm was a huge factor in his struggles. Nembhard's story is equally impressive as a second-round pick, who has developed into a crucial rotation player for this Pacers team. Remember how much praise the Pacers organization got from me and everybody else in the basketball media when they made that CCOM deal without moving any of their core pieces? Rick Carlisle's impact on this Pacers team cannot be overstated. And when you start talking about the greatest coaches in NBA history, his name absolutely belongs in that conversation. What Carlisle has done is build the entire identity of this team around Haliburton's unique skill set and basketball IQ. The way Carlisle has adapted his coaching philosophy to fit this current Pacers roster shows the kind of flexibility and basketball intelligence that separates great coaches from good ones. Carlisle's ability to make in-game adjustments and put his players in position to execute at the highest level has been evident throughout this entire playoff run. This is championship-level coaching from a proven winner who knows exactly what it takes to succeed at the highest level of basketball. Looking at the big picture for the New York Knicks moving forward, I want to address the elephant in the room first. No, I don't think Tom Thibodeau gets fired despite this disappointing end to their season. Thibs did show more willingness to experiment with different lineups as this series progressed. It honestly feels like those two players operate somewhat independently of each other, more than what you'd ideally want from your two primary offensive weapons. Now, I want to be absolutely clear. I love Josh Hart as a player, and I've said many positive things about his rebounding. I'm not necessarily saying they have to move on from Hart entirely. You can absolutely keep Josh Hart on your roster because he can still contribute meaningfully in a specific role.